What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo with Mike Golick Jr. That is me. With me, as always, super producer Brandon Newman. Brandon, what's going on?
Doing well. Happy Black History Month to you, Whitey.
That laugh you hear in the background, former NFL veteran offensive tackle, TCU's very own Marshall Newhouse in the building with us. Marshall, how we doing, man?
I'm good, boys. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I was on the edge. They tried to get me, but I came through. I'm here.
I could say, man, you had the long run. We got a lot of NFL news to get to today. Obviously, the big thing happened yesterday that we're going to get to talk about, someone that Marshall knows pretty well from his playing days. But you did come off the unique grind of the former player national championship run hustle for your TCU Horned Frogs, man. How was the ride leading up to it? Because I know you got that back end sickness coming off of it, like we all usually do for some of these big things. But how was the ride leading up to that? We haven't really talked much since I saw you out here for the title.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, if you just count, this was the first year that I had kind of really been away from the NFL, and I happened to be doing a pregame show for the TCU football all season. So I was uniquely close. You know, as an alum, you follow your team, you root for them, you cheer for them, but I was uniquely close. I had been getting to know some of the players and the new coaching staff, and I was up there for all the home games. And so that run leading into, postseason, I was like, wow, I got to go. Like, there was just never a doubt. I was like, once we made it, I'm following, I'm going. And then, Fiesta Bowl, Arizona. We went expecting a good game. We went expecting TCU to compete. And, we're such a small school punching above our weight class. We expected, if we lose, we lose, but I think we'll have a good showing. And then to win that game and make the national championship, you're just like, whoa. So there was never a doubt. Once we won, I was like, I booked everything right away. And luckily I have some family that lives in Southern California, so made a trip of it. But yeah, SoFi, tailgating in the rain, just all the things that normal fans do, I did it all. So I'm happy for it. I'm grateful for it, but it was a crazy little run.
Yeah, the tailgating scene is always, to me, the most interesting whenever you get done with playing, getting back to actually go and experience that. Really, I remember the first time I went back and did it at a Notre Dame game, I looked at my friends and I was like, I see why you guys all used to leave at halftime of our games. I'm exhausted here drinking at Pole 2 in the parking lot.
It's a full-time job. And then, there's a big mess made about SoFi not allowing traditional tailgating. So it wasn't, it was more just drinks in the lot, but just seeing countless people that you went to school with from grades above you, below you. It was just a reunion especially for such a small school. So no, man, it was great. You got mud stomped on national TV, but you take the good with the bad.
Shit, man. As someone who's had to cope with that for about a decade now, you just enjoy the ride.
You know what? I blame you because you called it leading up to the game. You're like, this feels like Notre Dame, Alabama. I was like, nah, Mike, shut up. You're not. Nah. You're not right. That doesn't make sense. And of course, it was worse than Notre Dame, Alabama. It wasn't Eddie Lacy running through Manti Te'o. It was the entire Georgia offensive defense running through both of our offensive defensive lines. That was brutal.
Well, how's the alumni feeling after that, bouncing back? Because obviously it was a great run. You got to celebrate, plenty to celebrate.
What me?
Oh, hey, they wouldn't have done me like that. Best believe. Oh, that's the exact right attitude. It was really a ton of fun. I got to get down to Fort Worth a couple of times and cover the team and be around you this year and see you out in Southern Cal. So really cool run. TCU was one of the best things that happened to college football this season. Yeah. So hopefully now can keep up, in the new Big 12, some version of that. Garrett Riley taking his talents to Clemson, a lot of the change there, but certainly, strong foundation laid by Sonny in year one. So
exactly. You take all that good, even with the rough ending, you take all the good, the exposure, TCU just, showing out for themselves in a lot of ways. I mean, from fandom, rough estimates, we have, 100,000 living alumni, all that stuff they're talking about. Michigan with 5 times that at least. And for TCU to show up and fill up half the stadium and cheer and be loud, and that's something that was pretty special. So people saw that, we're real and legit, and now it's about, it's not none of it's a failure. Getting beat in the national championship, it'll all be success if you use this as a launch pad. If things continue to progress, if your floor continues to rise, and then obviously you have seasons where your ceiling is high, you make a run, but your floor has to go up. And so I'm hoping for that. I think they have the right guy in Sonny, but we'll see. But it was fun nonetheless.
Incredible run there. A great cap to college football season to have the Horned Frogs involved. We might as well get to the big news on the docket. I woke up yesterday, and considering we record these podcasts the day before and put it out the morning of the day, waking up at 5:30 local here in California to see that Tom Brady has announced his retirement via Instagram video on the beach certainly was not the nicest thing I was looking for as I posted yesterday's news reacting to all the coaching information out there. But we did finally get it. Thomas Edward Patrick Brady announced his retirement from the NFL, said there's going to be no long goodbye letter this time. He used up that token last year. Marshall, when you saw this for now the second time, same day, 2 years in a row, did you actually believe it this time around when you saw a guy that you spent the 2019 season with the Patriots, you protected this man on the battlefield? Do you believe him this time when he says he's done?
Yeah, I do. There's just so many other things that are, concurrent happening right now. We just saw him just play pretty well, above average. He was a quarterback anyone would have wanted to have on their team. Throw 66 times in a divisional playoff game and lose to the Cowboys on a 9-8 team. We saw, speculatively struggles in his personal life. There's just so many things where you're like, even for him, he's defied the odds for over 6 years, at least, playing beyond anybody's average expected length for a quarterback. And you're like, man, it just feels like it's okay to walk away. You're just like, you want him to be okay with it. Cause you're like, you have nothing to prove to us. You've done it all, literally. If they could expedite the Hall of Fame process and it not be 5 years, you'd be in tomorrow. What you're not doing this for us anymore. So I saw him, on the beach with his toes in the sand. I'm like, good for you. Good for you. And then I think he has a little bit of salt for Shefty, because those dudes last year just ruined his whole operation. He wanted it to be on his terms. He might have walked away last year. He was leaving Tampa, he said. But I think there's a little bit of him not being able to control the messaging. And he's like, all right, I've worn out my welcome. I think it's time. So, good for you, Tom. Again, nothing to prove to us. Be a dad. Go get that 375 M's. Whew. Go do that, please. Do that.
Whew, yeah. Money coming out his way. And I think you're right. I said to someone, we say Tom Brady has 7 Super Bowls, and we say it so much that it's like when you repeat a word so often, you forget what it means. We just say it like it's something. We're numb to what an insane accomplishment that is, to your point about not needing to prove anything to anyone anymore, because it did reek like exhaustion. Because you've seen firsthand, and we all hear so much about the TB12 method and about what he does to prepare his body each and every week, each and every offseason to get ready for the season. To have that and then come out and be a team that's barely at 500 and a team that limps into the postseason, and for him to be getting hit as often as he wants, I'm sure there's a part of it where he says, I can't keep doing that. And then also the desires, I'm sure, like you mentioned, to go be with his family, to go maybe get a start on broadcasting now that he's seen Greg Olsen balling a little too hard in his chair.
Yeah, Greg Olsen's got the Arthur Fist meme just gripping real tight because Tom's about to come and be number one. I'm like, oh, man. And we love Greg. Jeez.
Yeah, we do. We love that. We love that for Greg. So it makes sense. I believe it for Tom. And now I know we kind of did it all last year. We did all of the recollecting, but I'm curious from your perspective, because we all saw the gigantic winning machine. We all saw that from the outside. For someone that was his teammate, what was your perception of him before you got to that Patriots locker room? And then how did it change, if at all, once you got to go to work with him every day?
I think like a lot of people, you have a reverence for him just because you've seen. I mean, I played against him. He'd come back and beat me three or four different separate times in dramatic fashion. He beat me down 2 or 3 times on different teams, and you have reverence for what he's been able to accomplish. And then you think, he's probably a pretty intense guy. You're not sure about how he interacts in the locker room and as a teammate. And then you get there. My circumstances were wild to even, be added to a team, let alone a Bill Belichick, Tom Brady team. But I was coming off an injury. I was in camp in New Orleans and was technically a free agent. So I came in to work out to show that my injury had healed. Worked out for Bill and was on my way home. And, Bill does all the personnel decisions. And I'm literally, he kept me an extra day. I think he was trying to tinker with the edge of the roster. I'm finally man, I got to go home. So I fly back here to Texas and I have a layover. And I remember as soon as my wheels touched down on the layover, I hear zzz, and my agent's like, hey, Bill wants to bring you in, sign you. I was like, okay. So I'm in Dulles, DC. I got a hop terminal. This is at midnight. Fly back to Boston. I get to Boston 1 a.m. They have a QC guy come pick me up in the minivan. I drive down to Foxborough in the middle of the night. I wake up at 5 a.m., sign my contract.
Damn.
Me and Antonio Brown signed on the same, minutes apart from each other, by the way. If that, just to put give y'all some sense of time and how things were and when that was. But I signed on a Wednesday morning, and I go to meetings, but they throw me right into a walkthrough. And obviously my head's spinning. I had very little familiarity with their offense and the way they did things. But from the moment, there was just an obvious gravity about him. And just his process, they do fast, just mentally fatiguing walkthroughs. That is meant to stress you out so that practices and games are kind of nothing. But I'm in there brand new, and he holds the standard up, but he was definitely understanding, oh, you literally just got here. But I jump in there, and all day he's talking to me. All day he's just you have any questions, let me know. And I'm learning little by little. That's the Wednesday. I end up starting at right tackle on the Sunday, down in Miami, the flight in Miami. And same thing, all the way leading up to the game. Any questions? He was just being a teammate, like a person. And that was the kind of shattered any of the, the high and mighty stuff that people get about him. It's just he is as close to a dude as someone of that stature can be. Treats you well like a human, a good teammate, obviously holds you accountable. He holds himself to such a high standard, but is a very understanding person. But intense, the ultimate competitor. And that's what I got from being there. I ended up starting 10 more games. That game, I have to flip to left tackle in the middle of the game. You know how hard that is. But start 10 more games, but just still the same guy. Ultimate just preparer during the week. And but not a person you couldn't just approach. That's the part that just kind of blew away your expectations, that you could approach him with most things. He's dealing with whatever he's dealing with, but he was not bigger than the rest of the guys around you. And that, for someone who's literally an international figure, that's just a wild thing to see in person, experience in person.
Yeah, I think that really is, and that's something Brandon and I have had former teammates that wound up going through New England and being teammates with him there. Kyle Rudolph, one of our good buddies, was with him down in Tampa, and that is kind of the one thing you do hear universally is, despite the fact, especially now, he's 45. I mean, what does he have in common with most of the players inside that locker room? Yep. And yet finding a way to connect like that, having the reputation we saw the chug off among so many quarterbacks in the last 2 years. I did always hear that Tom Brady could put down a beer better than you would imagine a guy who's as pretty up as he could. So yeah, I don't know if you saw that firsthand or not, but
I didn't see the beers, but I saw him eat a donut one time. And I was like, oh,
wow,
carbs,
wow,
sugar,
breaking news.
He indulged himself, and I was like, this This feels like something that needs to be documented, but I'm not going to do that because that's weird. But
that was the only experience I have comparable to that is one time I walked through the ESPN cafeteria and I saw Adrian Wojnarowski and Adam Schefter eating lunch with their phones not on the table.
Oh, wow.
And I was flabbergasted. I'm like,
wow.
So nothing was going to happen for that half-hour period because the only two people that could make it happen were right there. So that's about the only thing I have as close to Tom Brady eating a donut.
That must have been a sense of calm in the room, just like the world has stopped spinning for like at least 10 to 15 minutes with those two.
It's like when you see a Western and both the gunslingers put their guns down on top of the table, but then you also realize they've got another one right underneath pointed both at each other. Anytime it could go off in there.
Right. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
No, please.
In New England, they would get equipment guys would get these, I forgot the name of the place, but these donuts every Saturday. Saturday's a little lighter. You're either walking through or you're traveling. And I'm in my locker just, talking to whoever's next to me. And I see him go over there and snag a donut. I'm like, did you just see this? I'm like, it's like Steve Irwin. Like, look at this. It's a loyal Tom Brady eating a cob. I'm like, what? So he's just like us in a lot of ways. In some ways, not a lot, some.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about the money that's waiting on him a little bit, and we could spend more time talking about him.
That's
going to
be the easiest money he's ever earned, which is crazy to think about.
Well, I want to know. Actually, you talking about how much he prepares for things and how he's just been automatically good at a lot of things that he's done. He's worked to get there. How do you think he's going to transition to calling games and taking criticism? I think that's one of the things that comes early with that is like Tom Brady hasn't been in a position to take real criticism from actual people that know more about something than he does. So like him being coachable in that spot, like what should we expect for him at Fox?
That's a good question because you think about, the first guys that come to mind in that vein is Tony Romo, and now this year, Troy Aikman too, but this year, Greg Olsen. And
yeah,
the thing that I think has been consistent with all three of those guys is that they've, to different degrees, but overall, they've stayed themselves and worked around the actual coverage and the artistry, the craft of broadcasting. But I'm curious what Fox is going to ask him to do because this could just be, hey, Tom, we want your brain's context added to the game, but we don't need you to, get coached up on, not stepping on the color guy or like those intricate things that a broadcast needs because you're you. You have so much to offer by just being you. I would say Tony Romo, which maybe it's wearing off. Everyone loved the authentic emotion, excitement he had for the game, and now we're like, Tony, can you just shut up for a second? And then Greg, who was a tight end in the NFL but knows about every position and adds so much depth to the coverage. I wonder what they're going to ask and what he'll want to actually be. Is he going to be like, I'm going to show up to work. This is a new thing to conquer. I'm going to do whatever they ask me to do to be the best broadcaster ever, which would make sense. Or is he just going to be like, I'm Tom Brady. I'm just going to, if I see something that I remember from my playing days, which is everything and a ton, I'm going to add some context and y'all work around it. Y'all figure it out. So that doesn't seem like his character, but we've also never had someone of his stature depart straight from a Hall of Fame career into this. So it'll be interesting to see just kind of how both on the production side and from his personal, approach to all this, how it goes.
I am fascinated with that because the closest comp we'll have is what just went on with Drew Brees as far as a future Hall of Famer who dropped right into this. And then to Brandon's point about criticism, immediately is like, I don't need to take this. I'm rich. I'll take my ball and go home. But another guy, talk about diligent preparation, all the things, wasn't a dominant physical skill set. So I had to overcome that with the neck up stuff that both of those quarterbacks are famous for. Because I always think about with all-time greats, my dad always told the story about Reggie White trying to teach them the hump move during an individual period where their D-line coach gave them the period and said, Reggie, I want you to show these guys, you know it better than I ever could. And my dad said Reggie kind of stood there and tried to go through it for a couple minutes and then looked at the coach. He's like, man, I just know how to do it. I don't know how to teach it. Like Reggie was such a physical genius. He couldn't describe that to lesser talented people. With Tom, like you said, he's been so aware of what's everyone's job as the quarterback. How can I make everyone comfortable? He was never going to blow you away going back to the combine picture with physical ability. And so he's always been a study, work through it guy. But for Drew, that wasn't enough. There's still got to be an aptitude for how you walk into that situation. I saw some people supposing about how they may use him in the Super Bowl broadcast this year. And do you put him in there as a third with Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olsen and use him sometimes? Because, again, this is his dojo. The Super Bowl is his house. Right. I don't know what award's going to eventually be named for Tom Brady, but some sort of Super Bowl MVP or something around that game feels like it could be right for it. So this is his area of expertise, and kind of weaning him into it like that, since you're going to pay him more than he made as a player over the 10-year life of this deal, might be the opportune time.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, he is worth you maneuvering all of the things that you've done around him, at least in the short term, just to get him on air, just to get him in the atmosphere, eyeballs on TV. And then, like him personally, it'll be a different life, commentating, giving, context, and then people immediately popping back, whether it's informed or not, but giving their opinion. And I don't think he's been pretty savvy with social media, but he has a team. I think he has a buffer, but it's not always avoidable. And I think with the Drew Brees part, I think Drew Brees started doing this and was like, this is a full-time job. This is a lot of work, a lot of travel. I'm not sure I want to do this, and I don't have to. Like you said, I'm rich. So we'll see. We'll just see his aptitude for it all, because like you do play for this long and you're like, man, I've done thousands of game plans. I don't know if this is something that, he might say, I don't know if this is something that I want to spend my time doing, especially knowing that how much time of your kids you've missed, and we don't even know what Tom Brady likes to do. We're not sure.
Right.
Tom Brady might like to go crochet and golf. He likes to golf, but just like we're not sure if he wants to just go do something else.
That crocheting might be real. 80 for Brady. He looked real comfortable on that red carpet with all those ladies. He looked like he might want to spend some more time slowing life down a little bit, going and living in a yoga class, or visiting like what's his name from Ted Lasso, who goes and watches reality TV with his old ladies club. Maybe that's his life now.
Yes, for sure.
Roy Kent, yeah.
So it'll be in real time. We're all going to find out, like, obviously we see the money and we're like, oh, I'd do that. Every average person's like, I'd do that, but he's a different cat. And so it'll just be, we're all going to find out together. It feels like.
Well, the difference between him and Drew Brees and Roy Kent, for that matter, is I think Tom Brady's personality is still a mystery to the greater public. Like, I think we understand how good he is speaking to the media. Even with Jim Gray on his podcast, he MF'd him and then said, "Thank you for asking the question." You know what I mean? Like, it just like we ran to the screen to see Tony Romo, after waffling on a decision, become this new version of his, or just show his personality. But Tom Brady, his personality is like greatness. It's like his personality is like not making mistakes. So I'm going to be watching just inquisitively.
Right.
I think everyone wants to see Tampa Tom more than New England Tom from a personality standpoint.
We want to see the Tom that may or may not have gotten carried off the boat by some friends, slumped over, because that's a relatable Tom. We're all like, I think he gained a lot of points in people's eyes, because it was like, okay, you're a little slizzard after the Super Bowl win, as you should be. Like, good for you.
Throwing that Super Bowl trophy boat to boat was
right. Who among us hasn't dented a Super Bowl throwing it from boat to boat?
I mean, who among us at a base level hasn't gone to Florida to get a little bit drunker and looser? Brandon, you just moved to Florida now, and I'm sure your BAC just rises above the legal limit almost every day out of nowhere.
You're a Florida man now. Florida man. Florida man,
dangerous out here, man.
Oh my God. It's going to be really interesting to watch the next phase because Tom Brady has been the marker for so many of our lives. His sports totality has been my adult lifetime watching, playing, and then going back to watching sports all over again. So it feels like, especially now, he's gone, Eli's gone, Peyton's gone, Breeze is gone, Roethlisberger,
Rivers. Like Rodgers is the only one that of that ilk of that era that's still around, and him, maybe Matt Ryan, and we're all just like, it's like the end of those movies where it's like the Sandlot when guys are starting to disappear, and we're getting sentimental because like that was your childhood, and one by one.
I'd love to see the 1-by-1 freeze frame of like the story they put up for each of the quarterbacks. Like Phillip Rivers went on to coach high school football and have 9 more kids. It'll be. Wait, you brought up Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, another guy, you were drafted by the Green Bay Packers. You spent your early years there. Seeing what he's going through very publicly now as they're this will he, won't he with the Packers organization. Do you think he'll be back in Green Bay next year, or do you think that marriage is over?
That feels like a fractured relationship. And I think as a general public, I think people are just tired of the back and forth because, he, to his credit and to his privilege, he's used Green Bay, for leverage. And maybe I'll retire. I don't know if I want to do this. And they end up offering him $50 million. Good for you. But that act wears thin eventually, both to the Green Bay, the front office side, but to the fans too. People, they only like to be manipulated so much by a superstar. Like there's a limit even for Aaron Rodgers. And so that feels like a fractured relationship. I think both sides are very much aware that they've come up short the last 2-3 years. And so the whole, if we just run it back, well, it's like, what are we running it back with? I don't know how close we are to where Mahomes and where the Eagles are right now. So I don't think either one would be a reset, but they both might need a new change of scenery. And maybe that change of scenery is retiring for Aaron. I think he still wants to prove a little bit more, and we'll see. It'll be hard for people to grasp him not being a Packer his entire career, but that just feels like there's just been too much pettiness, too much passive aggression. I think that it's just run its course, in my opinion.
I mean, it's the kind of like the child of divorce type thing. This is Brett Favre all over again. He is doomed to repeat what he came in on the front end of, which I know has Jets fans probably very excited considering they've already been doing the jersey mock-ups here. And then I guess Minnesota too should start to think about their future with Aaron Rodgers.
Ooh, that's just a wild thing to think about.
Well, the drama between he and the Green Bay Packers is one thing. I think the NFC North kind of bounced them up out of there. The one time where the Detroit Lions, I don't want to be that guy, but it was all cool for him when he was the leader of the entire division. Now there's some competition, and he's looking for greener pastures.
The San Francisco angle of this is also interesting to me now just because of Tom Brady retiring, since their quarterback situation is one that feels volatile with all the injuries, Brock Purdy and the UCL, Trey Lance and what he dealt with his leg injury and procedures this fall. And I always wondered if that was going to be sort of the Dark Knight Rises situation. In their desperation, they turned to someone they didn't quite understand, and Aaron Rodgers, who just wants to watch the world burn and who fits very well into what Kyle and company want to do inside that offense. So I don't know. What do you think about a fit there? Because staying in the NFC, if you're going to leave, would probably be the priority given what lurks on the other side of the NFL right now.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying, and I see it too, but also he's still under contract, so that would have to come via a trade. And I don't see Green Bay trading him to not only within the NFC, but the reigning division champ and one of the NFC conference finalists. But I do agree it makes sense. he'd be in California where he's from. There's all that connections that we've tried to make over the years, but I don't know who made the point, but there's that comes with pressure if that ends up being a thing on him. Of this is we all think or assume is a Super Bowl ready team, a quarterback away. We are watching potentially Brock Purdy try to take them to the Super Bowl before he hurts his elbow. So anything less than a Super Bowl in that situation, we're looking at Aaron Rodgers a little differently. I'm not, because of his talent and who I know him to be from a physical standpoint, but from a leader of men and as someone who drags their team over the hump, we're all looking at him a little differently if that happens and they somehow falter. So that's a tough one. I think there are other landing spots that make sense or ones that might open up, but it's not as cut and dry as we might think, I don't think.
No, and the 49ers angle, you brought up the pressure on him. That's also a lot of pressure that doesn't exist right now on Kyle Shanahan, who is largely looked at as one of the solutions and not the problem. He just got a third stringer to the NFC Championship around that team. He's had 2 straight defensive coordinators who are going on to be coveted head coaching candidates. He's been Midas touch with all that. All of a sudden, you bring Aaron in, and it's anything south of a Super Bowl. It's like, well, why can't you make it work with a good guy? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I didn't think about the mutual extent of that, but yeah, I mean, we've given him the moniker of genius, the way he schemes people, in the offense, and he's got endless positionless players and all this other stuff. But it's crazy how the pressure mounts when the ultimate goal, just if you don't even get there. I mean, he was there with Jimmy G a few years ago, but it feels like we're so close, but also so far this year. And yeah, people are going to start to ask questions. They're going to start to wonder, like, is there something missing from this equation? He's also got to deal with losing DeMeco Ryans and what that's going to look like. So I think that's valid. I think that's very valid.
Well, I feel like that whole team is going to have to look different just to get him on the roster, which is it automatically not becomes a team that can't compete for the Super Bowl because they got Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. I mean, they're working with, minus Jimmy G, who's on a reduced contract for a veteran. But yeah, 2 quarterbacks on rookie deals, and that's allowed a lot of flexibility. And Aaron Rodgers' contract does not allow the same thing. And the PA is not going to let him take a sweetheart deal to let that happen. That's just not how things work anymore. So you're right.
It's going to be fascinating to watch that happen for him. Marshall, I did want to look just briefly. Now, when you got to Green Bay, I know you ended up on IR at the end of your rookie season, right? When you guys went to the Super Bowl in Green Bay?
Yeah, I was a rookie. I wasn't playing, but I was taking the reps for the veterans at tackle and had a back spasm in week 16. And they were just like, they don't want to end up this being something that takes longer. And the window for IR and signing people closes, and so they put me on IR. I was literally the day after they signed a guy, I was healthy, so I had to watch part of the run from the PT. But that season was kind of crazy, just because we were a team that was limping in. But I remember looking back, we had lost five or 6 games by like a field goal. It was just like we were there in every single game. And then you see Aaron just turn it on and do the Super Saiyan thing. You're like,
oh, this is why he's built different. So what are these 2 weeks like then in the lead up? What's that gap for as far as the team's preparation wise and dealing with all the noise that's about to come up? Yeah.
I mean, you're embracing this first week because it's your last week at home. So you're eventually going to have to go out to the Super Bowl site. So you're getting guys their last bits of real PT, treatment and all that stuff. And you're getting probably the end of the week before you leave, you're going to hit a little bit to get just like the best version of game simulation that you can. And so that guys' bodies can then kind of do a whole cycle of rest and recovery. And then, you're all prepping to leave. You're packing a bag and you're getting ready for media day and just the frenzy that happens when you get there. But as a team, you're just everything that like you thought was possible was right in front of you, and that's the wild part. Is just like, oh man, all that work that we reported in April comes down to like one game. That's nuts. that's nuts that all this is going to be on one game and it's going to take 2 weeks to get here. So you're trying to just compartmentalize. There's a little bit of lightness, but there's also like, all right, because you have those first few days because there's not a game this weekend. So you kind of get to the stress of, every Sunday is alleviated, but you're also just like, all right, this is our last bit before it just goes insane. So I remember our practices were intense. I was standing around for those practices and we were doing inside drill, everything. And that's not how everyone does it, but we were not going to let like the moment pass you by of like, hey, we've already given enough this season. Let's not stop now. And I'm sure each team approaches it a little differently, but there was a sense of determination for sure. Once guys took a couple days and kind of got settled, like, oh, this is it. Like all your energy focus for 10 more days, 9 more days, 8 more days. And then you travel and next thing you know, it's on top of you.
Yeah, that feeling and realization of the whole eyes of the sport being on you, being the last two teams in the dance is a really, really unique spot to be. Before we let you go, I mean, we're hopeful we'll see you out there in Scottsdale, but looking at the two teams in this, Patrick Mahomes on one side with the Chiefs sort of limping into this with some guys hurt on their team versus this Philadelphia Eagles team that's just mud stomped their way through the NFC. What's your early read on this game? What do you like?
Yeah, I think the big storylines are obviously the quarterbacks, and like we haven't seen Jalen Hurts have to really like scrap yet. They've built the team in such a way where it's been, give him all the credit in the world, but it's been every position it's loaded for bear. And so I'm excited to see if, Kansas City is going to pose some problems, especially if they get up on Philly. And I want Jalen Hurts to scrap. I want to see. I have no doubts about his grittiness and his determination. But when have they had real adversity this season in game where there's urgency? And so I want to see that. I love their O-line. Obviously, I love Lane and Mailata and Kelsey, and those dudes are just incredible. They can do every scheme in the book. They pass protect their asses off, and that's given Jalen the best chance to be his best self. And then obviously Pat, the quality of his ankle. We saw what he could do on, basically nothing on a peg leg, on a flamingo leg. He'll be a little bit healthier. And I think he's a guy that we're starting to do that thing where we act like getting to 5 straight AFC championships is like a walk in the park. We're starting to do that thing where we're going to where he's obviously the MVP, but we're making up reasons because we might be a little bored already, which is insane. He's that dude. And so I think having a Super Bowl under his belt, that pressure's gone. He lost when his team wasn't as good. And he made some Superman stuff, but just couldn't get it done. He's over the hump of, I got through Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. I'm here now. I just think his determination to just put himself in the record books before he's 30, he's 28, 27. It's just crazy to think about. So I'm excited for that, man. I don't know how Philly, he's changed his game so much this year, which is crazy. Like, losing Tyreek, he's had to just be like, all right, who's open? Which has been bad for the rest of the league. we were all worried, like, oh, what's he do without Tyreek? Oh, he's going to be better without Tyreek because he's got to spread it around. Philly's got 2 great corners, a great defense, a deep defensive line rotation. Man, this is going to be a hell of a game. I think people are not, I think we're not really understanding how cool of a matchup this is for so many reasons, but just on each level of the football, there's good football to be played. There's not a lot of weak points where you're like, oh man, someone's going to struggle. It's going to be ugly. Like, no, these are going to be good on good. And the reason what's the spread? A 1.5? Like, This is going to be a crazy, crazy Super Bowl. And I think the Super Bowl we deserve. Both number ones, both talented, packed deep. I'm excited for it, man. And you want to see the best people come through. I'm excited for Pat, excited for Jalen. Texas high school quarterbacks.
Talk about it.
First two black quarterbacks. A lot of cool storylines, so it'll be fun, man.
It's going to be a blast. Marshall, we hope we get to see you out there during Super Bowl week, man. We appreciate you giving us some time and taking us inside a couple of Hall of Fame careers and certainly this road to the Super Bowl, man. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
Fellas, I appreciate it, as always.
All right, Brandon, I know you know what happened when Bobby Boucher came back at halftime and the Mud Dogs won the Bourbon Bowl, so I'll ask you another question. Do you know what time it is?
Every step I take, every move I make, every single day, every time I pray, I've been standing in the dark, thinking of the day you finally went away from Deflategate. What a bond to break this down in the third.
That's probably the most involved remix of a song you've done so far. Befitting of Tom Brady in his career, for sure.
Thank you, Mike. I just wanted to give the proper send-off to somebody I have a lot of mixed feelings about.
I know. You set a defensive tone on this podcast, both with your mere presence and with the Bobby Boucher jersey for the YouTube audience there. As always, download, subscribe, rate, and review Gojo. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review. And tell Brandon how much you appreciate the lyrical prowess that went into that. Brandon, let's get to this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to finish off the day. And this is a bit of an update on a story we talked about. Jaden Rashada in the case of the $13 million NIL deal at Florida that wasn't. For anyone that missed it, highly rated, 31st ranked prospect playing quarterback, had originally signed with Florida during the early signing period. Yesterday was the late signing period, the second day that used to be the normal one. But when the NIL collective at Florida backed out of the $13.5 million deal, he requested his release from Florida's letter of intent and ended up signing with Arizona State University, which is a huge coup for Kenny Dillingham, first-year coach over there, the former OC at Oregon that takes over there. He's the first ESPN 300 commit for Kenny Dillingham, and Arizona State this cycle gives them a great bit of momentum. Worth noting, Jaden Rashada's father actually played at Arizona State back in the day. He said, I want to keep this short and let it be known I'll be attending ASU, my childhood dream school, my father's alma mater, and a place where I'm happy, and a school where the head coach has always had my back, which I thought was interesting given the background of what just went on.
Mike, do you think ASU has deeper pockets, or they have them in a different pay-as-you-go, pay-as-you-play program?
So this is interesting. 2 sources told ESPN the Rashada family wasn't focused on NIL deals in the second process. And a source of the family made it clear they didn't want to engage with the NIL deals with ASU's collective prior to his signing. So it wasn't a factor in the ways that we talk about with the Florida case. We'll see what happens now that he is there. He joins Notre Dame, Drew Pine, who transferred there. BYU transferred Jacob Conover, and then 3-star Israel Carter, who comes in this class as well.
Oh, Drew Pine's got to be pissed, right? Wait a minute, though. Speaking of, I didn't have a childhood place that I wanted to go play college football, so and you obviously did with the University of Notre Dame, God Country, Notre Dame. How much money would you have to have taken per year not to play college football at Notre Dame?
Probably $13.5 million over 4 years. Like, I'd have been like, can you guys at least be ballpark? Can we get close? Can we touch something? But I don't know, man. 13.5 is 13.5, however you split it. And I love Notre Dame, and I wouldn't trade y'all for the world. And if there's any part of this someone's going to clip, there's no amount of money you could have paid me not to go to Notre Dame. The pride and tradition of Notre Dame will not be left to the weak, timid, and non-committed. But if you slid me 13.5, I swear to God, I'd jump.
I mean, that's...
Like, honestly, anyone with a Notre Dame degree, if I turned down $13.5 million, to be clear, I was not a player worth $13.5 million. But in the alternate reality where I was, anyone with a Notre Dame degree probably would have said, yeah, you need to make $13.5 million before you're 22. That'd be pretty cool.
Hey, I know this isn't like the right thing to say, but I know for a fact I wouldn't know what to do with that money. So I don't know if I would be rushing to get it, if that makes sense. Like I may have been like too practical in that.
You know what the easiest way to learn what to do with that money is?
Get it?
Find out after you get it.
Yeah.
You can't learn without doing, Brandon. That's day one stuff.
I can see that.
We'll see what Jaden Rashada is able to do with all that. Congratulations to him. Big fan. Kenny Dillingham did a lot, harnessed all the good in Bo Nix. So this is going to be a place that if he goes and shows out quickly is going to prove itself as a nice quarterback landing opportunity for guys in that offense that we saw do so well. Brandon, let's get to that. News in the NFL. Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa just cleared concussion protocol yesterday, a source told ESPN. NFL Network was first to report that news, but remember, he had 2 diagnosed concussions. We know that there were the scary instances during the year that prompted the NFL to change its concussion protocol rules, where Tua Tagovailoa missed part of 6 games this season with concussions in week 4 and week 16. So happy that he is now clear of that. Worried that it took that long. We know and have heard from plenty of medical experts, not every concussion is the same for every person. It's nonlinear recovery-wise. And so the fact that he's out of that protocol and now is going to be in the decision-making process of his offseason, wondering what his future of football looks like.
Yeah, Mike, that's really scary for me. Obviously, like you said, it can take a long time to come back from one. We've had plenty of guys that, it took longer. Like there's a specific test you have to, pass and get a specific score to get past it. And, some people just aren't there in their recovery. But I worry for Tua in a way that I've never worried for Tua before. Like even with all the injuries that came before he even got to the NFL, I'm concerned for him in a very real way, and I hope he makes the right decision for himself. But it's a scary place to be in.
It's so different for every player. We remember going through this with Luke Kuechly, a guy who was our age peer-wise, and you see him take slight hits and he's in tears dealing with the concussion symptoms that he had back then. I know personally for me and my family, my brother-in-law, Ben Broniker, who played tight end for the Chicago Bears, dealt with concussions in his final season and knew he wanted to go to medical school. He's in medical school now, and so was very hyper aware of making sure he did right by his long-term plan. So everyone's got a different vantage point in the way they come to this. It's ultimately Tua's decision, and that's the way that it should be. But it is one, Chris Greer, the Dolphins GM, said that they will enter the 23 season with Tua as their starter, that doctors in Miami have spoken to don't think his concussions will leave him more susceptible. But this is still an area we're learning a lot of information about. So well wishes to Tua. Glad to hear he's doing better. And we will all wait to see if, his younger brother Talia, who's at Maryland, spoke out and said he thinks his brother's going to come back out and keep playing during bowl season. But we got some time to go before we get to that point. Brandon, let's get to the third. The W is having an offseason, man. Breanna Stewart, the prize free agent jewel of this offseason and former league MVP, has announced that she will be playing for the New York Liberty, leaving the Seattle Storm, where she won 2 titles in 7 years, the team that drafted her. Brandon, this is another super team in the works now. She joins former number 1 overall pick out of Oregon, Sabrina Ionescu, and then Jonquel Jones, the 2021 WNBA MVP, who just came over from Connecticut this offseason. So them and the Aces, it's like that scene in Godzilla versus Kong where the guy is like, let them fight. That's what it's going to be like when these two teams lace it up, man.
And I'm excited to see it. Obviously, we haven't mentioned Becky Hammon, obviously now being the head coach of the Aces. One thing I love about Stewie is that it's her social media. The fact that she speaks in emojis and we never really have to or get to hear her speak at all. And she's like giving out hints and messages and puzzles. I'm so envious of that, because to be in a position where you could just communicate via emojis is a special, it's rarefied air.
It is. It's gifted. Her and Matt Rule, apparently, in college football, who's decided to only communicate in emojis. But yeah, that was a big part of Stewie's free agency, was reading through all the cryptic emoji tea, but also on a much more large scale front. She made it clear in all of her free agent visits, and she met with the Liberty, the Storm, the Minnesota Lynx, and the Washington Mystics, that chartered air travel was a key factor in her free agency. She's one of the ones that led the charge this offseason in a conversation that we saw Ja Morant say he'd pitch in on. Kyrie Irving was very vocal on about trying to change that as the baseline for WNBA travel, citing that it's a huge source of player health and safety, their wellness in not having. I remember Chene and her sister Nneka this last year for the Sparks, they got stranded their team overnight and had to spend the night in an airport in the middle of a season. And we already know travel, especially for basketball, where you're playing so many games in a given year, that stuff adds up over time. Her agent came out and said, Stewie's free agency is the story of the WNBA at an inflection point. Players understand their value, the potential of the W, and are eager partners in growing a business that has incredible momentum. So Breanna Stewart says that she has, pledged to donate, said, although none of the teams involved could make a direct pledge, this is a salary cap issue. A lot of people think she's moved the needle enough to make this a real conversation going forward. Joe Tsai, who's the owner of the New York Liberty, has also been someone who's been talking about this publicly for a while and been a proponent of this. So I will be very curious to see if she's been able to leverage a situation that certainly benefits her personally in free agency into something that betters the league. That's something the women of the W have always done a really great job of, is understanding it's going to take all 144 of us to enact change in whatever realm we want to do it in. And this time, Stewie in her moment trying to look out for the rest of the league in the process.
Yeah, I mean, her going to New York is looking out for the rest of the league in a very real way, and linking up with Sabrina. Like, I think that the two powers, coast to coast, could move mountains for the WNBA.
Do you think people will forgive the Empire State Building? In her announcement video, she was taking off her Storm jersey and putting on a Liberty jersey, and then the picture next to it was the Empire State Building lit up with Stewie written on the side after coming off a weekend where it famously flew Eagles colors for a little bit. I feel like it's too little too late, Brandon, but New York is a basketball town, like she said, so maybe this will be enough.
And New York also has the formula for eyes. I believe the social media account for the Empire State Building gained about 100,000 followers over these last couple of days since the lighting. So,
damn,
hey, somebody's doing something right.
We got. The final form of this is the Empire State Building has a Super Bowl commercial that we're not ready for.
Oh, man.
God help us all. God help you if you make it to the end of this podcast. As always, we appreciate you if you do. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review Gojo wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating. Leave us a review. Check us out on the DraftKings YouTube channel as well under the Gojo with Mike Golick Jr. playlist. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Boom. Money in the bank.